So, you want to play Smoke. I got you. Smoke is your typical mix-up character. He's basically gonna essentially mix you up from all different directions, from all different heights. That's his job. And because of that, he's actually not that easy to play. But once you get a basic understanding of how he works, you can definitely get things done with him. So his first special move is going to be his Shadow Blade. It's an anti-air grab, and the purpose of it is exactly that. When your opponent jumps up in the air, you can kind of throw this out, and they're going to get hit. I'm going to show you an example now. So you can kind of do that, and it brings them close, and that's the important part, right? Because it brings them close, now you can kind of run your offense. If you meter burn it, it does more damage, and it brings them even closer. So now you're in throw range. His second special move is going to be Smoke Bomb. So he essentially just throws a bomb, and he teleports to where it is, and it hits the opponent on the other side in an overhead. Right? And this is pretty good for ending combos, so you can do things like this. You know, you can go, this string normally is a overhead low, but then you can kind of do and get a double overhead there. So it's a pretty good tool. You can throw it basically wherever you are on the screen, and it's going to work. Now, obviously, there is a trajectory of him throwing the bomb, but no matter what, it's going to end up on the other side of the opponent. If you meter burn it, it's got armor, so this is going to be your wake-up reversal, and it makes you invisible. And this, it doesn't last as long as someone like Reptiles, for example, but it's very useful because now I can kind of mix you up. I mean, who doesn't love invincibility? Like, I don't even know what I'm hitting with. I'm just kind of throwing buttons. In this invisibility state, the effects that he has on his normal moves, they don't show up. So, for example, this back two, he's got like a little smoke trail. But if I do the invisible one, there's no trail. So they won't know that I hit them. Again, like most invisibilities, if you block an attack or if you get hit, you will lose the invisibility. The third special move is going to be Vicious Vapors. So this move I use a little sparingly, simply because it's kind of risky to throw out, right? You do it, it's your minus 16 and you're right in their face. So most people are just going to be able to, you know, hit you with a 1 or a 2, and most of the time it's just going to work. The important thing about this move, though, is that you can cancel it. And this cancel actually takes no meter. You can kind of just do it, and you're fine. In some of the combo trials I've seen, you kind of do things like this, and then you cancel, and then you kind of follow up with other stuff. If you meter burn it, it kind of just does more damage. It doesn't really have any other properties other than that, but that's the cool part. So one thing is that it does go through projectiles. So Sonya's going to shoot a shot, and I can kind of hit the opponent like that. His final special move is going to be Smoke Port. This is the only special move that he can use both on the ground and in the air. So it is a teleport. This one works closer to Scorpion's teleport in MK11, where he literally teleports directly behind the opponent no matter where he is. The downside, obviously, is that it can be blocked. You're minus 30. Your opponent can definitely punish you no matter who they are. But you can cancel it. So you can cancel the attack. If you're in the air, it's going to cancel to the other side, but you're not going to do a hit. And so that's important just movement-wise. The other one, if you're on the ground, you're just going to cancel in place. You're not going to move. So that's good for, like, you know, your opponent thinks you're going to block a certain way or they're ready for an uppercut. You basically just stand in their face and you do what you want to do. Meter burning it allows you for some combo opportunities. As far as his anti-airs go, his stand 1 is incredibly good. You look at the angle at which it does, he hits high up. This is almost like a Guilty Gear Strive 6P, for those of you guys that have played that game. The only thing I would say is that when people do come in, it's not as easy to get a combo as you might think. You have to time it a little bit. But overall, still a great tool. He's got his down 2. This is an 8-frame uppercut. Again, not as much range as someone like Reptile, for example. But for 8 frames, I'll take that any day of the week. So stand 4 can work as an anti-air as well. So you get a little bit of a combo, you can kind of just do that right after. Just be a little preemptive with it, and you should be fine. Let's talk about his pokes. So stand 1 obviously is going to be his fastest button, 7 frames. Minus 2 on block, so that's really good. And it's got a pretty big range, like pretty decent range. Forward 1. This is an advancing high. This can also be used as a poke, mainly because you can buffer it into his string. but you know, it still attacks you from a decent distance, so I would recommend it. So then he's got forward 3. Forward 3 is pretty good. It's a low, and he's still standing, and it's pretty quick. And this can lead to a string, or this could lead to you kind of doing a cameo attack. So I would throw this out a lot. A lot of smoke players do, and I definitely do as well. And then you got back 4. Back 4, really quick sweep. Not as much range as someone like Reptile, for example, but it gets the job done, and it's +2. So you could throw this out whenever you want, and you will have literally no issues. So his strong buttons are going to be back 2. Back 2 is a standing overhead. This goes directly into a really quick low. I get caught with this all the time online when I'm playing against other smoke players. People just do this, and I barely see it coming. So abuse this button, right? Even though it's 28 frames, you're -5. So even if they block it, I don't care. Why would I stop throwing it? Then you got standing 3. Standing 3 is going to be your starter for your launcher. Okay, they're too high, so it can't be ducked. Be careful. But you're going to use this in like the middle of stuff. So if I'm doing something like this, just like that. I wouldn't recommend just throwing it out willy-nilly, but it's a button you can use. And it works as an occasional anti-air, but through my testing, it's not really as reliable as I would want. Then you got forward 4. Forward 4. So flurry of high kicks, but he's +8. So what this means that I can kind of just decide to either throw a strike or do a throw or whatever I want to do. It works great with his mix-up, you know? His best strings, first is going to be the 1-1. This is going to be, obviously, your fastest way of getting damage. And then he does have a little bit of a dial-in string here, where it ends in a low. Then he's got forward 1-2. So the cool thing about this is that not only is it a safe string, you're +2, right? So your advantage on block, but if you actually manage to land it, you can get a grab off of it. You can either throw them forward, or this is the back version, so that you can get easy side switches. So I have seen some smoke players, depending on the cameo, you can get some damage off of this, some other stuff off of this, but I normally, when I'm just playing smoke, I kind of just finish it off with this if I end up landing the grab, just for some extra damage. Then you got back 2-3. Right, I had mentioned this before in that normal, really fast overhead low, and you can kind of mix it up by just doing the overhead into another overhead. So pretty strong. And then you got forward 3-2. This is a low overhead. So this was an overhead low, and this is the opposite. And not a lot of people know how to deal with this. Over time, they will. And it ends in an overhead. And you're +2. And you're at a, you know, close enough distance for you to do stuff. So yeah, use and abuse this. And then use and abuse this. And you'll be good to go with him. So let's talk a little bit about his weaknesses. So he doesn't really have a projectile. And that's kind of rough in this game. At least it would be rough if you didn't have cameos to kind of help him out with that. So we'll talk about that in the next section. But essentially, yeah, he doesn't have a projectile. So as far as special moves go, he actually doesn't have any safe ones. You kind of have to hope and pray that your opponent doesn't know how to punish you if you're just throwing things out. So you have to be careful about your timing and your placement of your special moves. Like I mentioned, his normals do not have a lot of range. So that is something to be desired. But again, you can make up for that with... He makes up for it with how fast he moves around the screen and the options that he has. Alright, so now let's talk about some of the cameos that I think work really well with him. It's Serena. Serena, I think, is one of the best cameos in the game currently, because she provides a lot of options, and specifically for Smoke, she patches up a lot of his weaknesses. So, number one, it's going to be her ability to just throw projectiles on the screen. It's incredibly fast, and it allows him to kind of do stuff, you know? It gives him, like, cover approach options. It just gives him something to challenge for full screen that isn't a teleport and doesn't keep him, or doesn't make him vulnerable. Then he's got, or she's got the reversal. Then she's got this reversal, which works great on wake up. I don't have to spend any meter to do this, for example, and possibly get hit. I would just wake up using Serena, and she got me covered, basically. And also, on strings that are not particularly safe, I can just kind of have her, and I'm -3 now, and now I am safe, no matter what. Then, you know, the move that everybody uses, Serena's back assist, where it's a double hitting kind of like, she throws 2 sickles, and they come back to her, so it's like 4 hits total. Really easy to combo from. Boom, boom. You know, that's 380 damage for like no meter. So that's really great for Smoke. And like I said, she leaves a presence on the screen. So like even if the opponent's like blocking this stuff, I can kind of still freely move around and kind of do some tricky stuff. And the last one to talk about would be her meter well, where she drains the opponent of their meter. It doesn't give you any extra, but this is important because now your opponent can't break away from combos, even if they were at 3 bars. She takes around a full bar if you keep him locked down. So if I'm pressuring him in the corner, right, I can just keep him here. I'm just pressing buttons, and he's going to be losing meter. So that's something very important. Alright, so then the second cameo that I've chosen would be Motaro. So like I had said, Smoke doesn't have a projectile. Well, Motaro fixes that. He's actually got 2. So the number 1 is going to be him just shooting this turret. Now this does take up the entire bar, but it's very useful because Smoke is able to cancel out of it pretty quickly and move around, which means that now I have this thing like covering my approaches. So let's do something like this. And I'm covered for sure. It does take a while, obviously, for it to recharge, but this is an approach option that you have to kind of mix up your opponent for free. He's got a teleport. This is quite possibly the fastest teleport in the game. I'm not entirely sure, but as far as the utility on this, it's incredible. Because I could do tricky things like throw my kunai, and then Motaro just teleports me, and now hit him with a low. So something like that, you know. So Motaro works pretty well in that aspect as far as like getting around projectiles and just movement in general. And then he's got a low shot, so another projectile that you could use. So normally a string would end in an overhead. So for example, this one would end in an overhead, but I could just do, and that would end in a low now. So it gives him an extra mix option as well as it being a projectile. And then finally, he's got his projectile defense, this kind of like shield that reflects any projectiles that are thrown at him. So that even further allows him to deal with zoners and things like that, on top of all the tools he already has for that stuff. So the second cameo I've chosen was Cyrax. So we can go over his moves once again. First, he's got his pressure bomb. His pressure bomb, you know, I can hold it there. Your opponent's thinking about stuff, and I can do empty attacks that don't really mean anything. Be careful because it will hurt you, but you know, doing things like this, and then they're not really knowing what's coming. Maybe that was a horrible example, but you catch my drift. Then you got the net. The net is a projectile now, so now Smoke has one, and he can hit it from full screen, and Smoke has all the time in the world to just kind of do stuff. You know, I can, from full screen, I can attack this. It's gonna be perfectly fine. Or just dash in and do my thing. And then finally, he's got his cyrax copter, where it's gonna help me lock down my opponent and mix them with either an overhead or a low. And they're gonna just have to take this. There's a lot of movement also, which is beneficial. So there's a lot of things happening on the screen at the same time. So that kind of further increases the mental stack on your opponent. As far as ease of use goes, his movement, he's got a lot of teleports and cancels. So that are actually, if you want to be good with Smoke, you are going to have to learn this stuff. Because if not, then it's pretty bare bones, I would say. He's got a few dial-ins. He's got his 1-1-1-4. It's forward 1-2-2-4. So he does have a few dial-ins, but most of them are safe, and they also do advance his movement a little bit. So that's the beneficial part about that. Like I said, his game plan is going to be mixing your opponents using your strings, your cancels, and having your cameo kind of cover you on your approaches. And his execution is actually not that bad. The only difficulty would be doing cancel combos. So I had mentioned before, doing things like this in the corner. That can get rough if you don't know exactly what you're doing, right? And especially if you're doing it point blank, for example. If there's a little bit of distance, doing cameos or doing cancels, it's not that hard. But if you're right in their face, I can't really even get it consistently. You know? So that would take a little bit to get used to. So as far as the special moves go, yeah, he's got only 4 of them, and none of them are safe. So you have to be careful with how they work. As far as the startup on them goes, they're pretty fast, but if your opponent sees them coming again, they're not very great. I feel like Smoke is a character that not everybody will get the hang of. It took me some time to understand how he works, but to get the best out of him, you need to use a lot of his cancels. He's lacking projectiles, which means you need to find ways around the screen, and you need to be like very tricky on how you move, like using things like this to get through projectiles and stuff like that. I feel like I could see how strong he might be in the hands of a pro player, but he's not an easy character at all. He requires a lot of mind games and a lot of risks, honestly, to be played. Like most mix-up characters in fighting games, he's great when your opponent guesses wrong a lot of the times, but when they're guessing right and you're wrong, it's very hard for him to win, in my opinion. So for ease of use, I'm going to go ahead and give him a 2.5 stars. So if you happen to find any smoke tech or any tips that you want to give me, or just let me know how I did in general, leave it down in the comments, drop a like, and subscribe. This has been Enter Smoke.